And welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Today we're going to continue to find out about John and his relationship with his first wife Cynthia through her book entitled John. So this section of the book tells about when Cynthia discovered she was pregnant. She begins by saying that she and John never used contraception. No one told them about it, teachers or parents. And John and Cynthia felt it wouldn't happen to them until it did. So Cynthia told her best friend, but she was ashamed when she thought about telling her mother. And also, Cynthia didn't know how John was going to react. She figured he wouldn't take it very well, so she thought she would have to cope alone. Cynthia waited a few days and then told John. She said he went pale and then there was a fear in his eyes. John said after a few minutes of silence that they needed to get married. Cynthia gave him a way out and said he didn't have to marry her, but he was insistent. He told her, "Neither of us plan to have a baby, Cyn, but I love you and I'm not going to leave you now." Cynthia knew that she loved John, so they decided to marry and have a family together. John told his manager, Brian, about the baby and the marriage plans, and Brian told John to think carefully and told him he didn't have to go through with it. John was insistent, and he wanted to marry Cynthia, so Brian helped him to get an emergency license, and they booked the registrar's office for the first available date. Next, John went to Mimi, and she didn't take it very well. She screamed and raged and said she'd never speak to John again if he went through with it. Mimi, of course, thought that Cynthia planned to get pregnant to trap John. And John's 16-year-old sister was there at the time and said, John stood up to Mimi and said, "You don't understand, Mimi. I love Cyn. I want to marry her." And John loved Mimi and was hurt by her reaction. She declared she wouldn't be at the wedding, nor would anyone else in his family. So he walked out of the house, vowing he would never go back. Cynthia said she had an easier time telling her mom. Cynthia waited till the last day of her mom's visit with her to tell her. Her mom's only concern was for Cynthia. Cynthia's mom regretted that she had to return to Canada and wished she could stay in England to take care of Cynthia. She put her arms around her and said, "We all make mistakes, and it would turn out all right in the end." And that's great words of advice. Cynthia said she cried so hard the next day when her mom left, but she had to manage without her, and the next day she married John. And what a brave girl she was. So the wedding, Cynthia said that day was so unreal it was like watching a movie and being a part of it at the same time. Her panic went away when John said he would marry her, but then John started to panic. He wasn't ready to get married. It wasn't part of his plan. Cynthia stated it wasn't her plan either. John, though, was worried about how it would affect the group. He had been told the fans wouldn't accept the boys with steady girlfriends, so how would they feel if they knew he was married? A great part of the book stated that no one understood that her and John were deeply connected to each other on many levels. They were also passionately connected to each other. They loved each other's company and were each other's best friend. He needed her uncritical love and support, and she needed his confident belief in himself and in her. She and John felt that one day they would marry, and anyone who knew them thought they would too. The rumor was that everyone was miserable at the last minute, but it was far from the truth. Because it was the last minute, there was no flowers, no reception, no beautiful dress, and no photographer. John got used to the idea of marriage and became gentle and protective toward her. Cynthia said that Brian was more than a manager, he was a friend, and he went to pick Cynthia up and take her to where the ceremony would be. Cynthia had to get ready on her own because her friend was away on vacation. And she couldn't afford a new outfit, so she wore her best purple and black check two-piece suit with a frilly high-necked white blouse that Astrid, the girl in Germany, had given her. She put her hair up in a French pleat and added black shoes, a black bag, and a touch of pink lipstick. Cynthia said that Brian was dressed in a pinstripe suit and looked dapper. He escorted her to a chauffeur-driven car. He made her feel special, and he told her she looked lovely. She said the weather was awful. The sky was overcast and gray, and it looked like it would rain any minute. And it was so sweet that when she got in the building, John, Paul, and George were in the waiting room, and they were in formal black suits, white shirts, and white ties, and the only smart-looking outfits they had. And George and Paul were there to support John, and all three of them were nervous. John jumped up and kissed Cynthia when he saw her and said she looked beautiful. Cynthia's brother, Tony, and his wife came in next. He put his arm around Cynthia to show her he was a protective big brother, and no one from John's family was there, thanks to Mimi. So John and Cynthia were led into the registrar's office, and before anything was said, some workers started using a pneumatic drill. They tried waiting for the noise to stop, but he wasn't going to stop, so they continued. and the registrar asked the groom to step forward, and George Harrison jokingly stepped up, and they all struggled to keep a straight face. The registrar wasn't amused, so they continued on. The ceremony went on, and minutes later they were outside the room, and they all laughed, glad that it was over. So then the rain had begun, and they all ran down the street and went to a place called Reese's to have lunch, which was soup, chicken, and trifle. They didn't serve alcohol there, so they toasted with water. Cynthia said a full church wedding with all the extras couldn't have made her happier. The weird thing was that Cynthia and John's wedding was a carbon copy of John's parents', and they had married 24 years earlier. They married at Mount Pleasant and had gone to Reese's for lunch. So Brian treated them all to lunch, 15 shillings a head. He then surprised them with a flat he had. He said they could live there as long as they needed it. John was so surprised he hugged him. Later they learned that is where Brian would take his partners for privacy because he lived with his parents. Cynthia said it was a lovely place, a ground floor flat, tastefully decorated and furnished, and it had a bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, sitting room, and a walled garden. That was a great wedding gift. Cynthia said they enjoyed playing husband and wife. He would bring her flowers and pieces for the home. One day he came home with an ancient coffee table. It only cost a $5. So Cynthia cooked, though she wasn't very good at it. She said she made things like sausage and mash, cheese on toast, or a packet of Vesta beef curry and rice with sliced banana on top. Now next, Cynthia meets Ringo. Ringo joined the group 5 days before Cynthia and John's wedding. He came over to visit John. He said they got off on the wrong foot. She invited him to stay for supper, and she served up curry. He had a childhood illness and couldn't eat spicy food. He refused it. So she felt like he was ignoring her and talking to John. Cynthia felt like maybe Ringo thought she was stuck up because he came from the roughest parts of Liverpool. Later, she found out that he was the most kind-hearted, easygoing, and good-natured man alive. Cynthia knew he was right for the group. They shared the same sense of humor, and he could give back as good as he got from them, and they loved that. The flat was a bit nerve-wracking at times. Brian's flat had one major drawback. The bedroom was separate from the rest of the flat. To reach it, you crossed the main hall, which was shared with the tenants from other flats. Anyone could walk in off the street and open their bedroom door, or the door to the rest of the flat, unless they kept them both locked. The flat attracted a lot of shady characters. Cynthia felt nervous when she had to be there alone. They didn't like having to keep locking and unlocking the doors. And one night, someone started banging on the door looking for a woman named Carol. John told them that no one by that name lived there, so they went away, but then they came back, banging hard on the door and trying to pick the lock, saying that they knew she was in there and open up. Cynthia ended up shouting, "The only bloody woman in here is me. My name is Cynthia, and I'm 3 months pregnant." So they left after that, but needless to say, John and Cynthia didn't get any sleep that night. So I'll end the video on this segment. Next, we'll find out what's happening in their lives when the band starts to get more and more successful. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, that would be great. So if you haven't done it, click the notification bell, and you will get a notice when a new video is ready to watch. I hope everybody's been having a good day. Tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.